Welcome, everybody. My name is Tim Stewart. I'm president of the Greater New Britain Chamber of Commerce. And I'd like to just give you a 2-second history of how we got here today. A couple of months back, Karen over York and one of my old next-door neighbors, Amy Richmond, approached me at the Chamber and said, you know, we have this new initiative. We want to promote this thing. How do we get this thing out to the public eye? And I suggested we do something public. And I then, as I served as on the board here at Tunxis, I met Karen DeBerry through the Oasis, and I said, what a perfect place this would be. So things all fell in line, and here we are today. And this wouldn't be possible if we didn't have the cooperation of the great folks at Tunxis Community College. And I'd like to introduce Ms. Catherine Addy, president of the college, here to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much. Welcome to Tunxis. We are always proud to have programs such as this one and to salute those who work so hard on behalf of all of us. I would particularly like to recognize Tunxis veteran students who are here today sitting over at this table. So raise your hands, guys. Just say hello. We try to be very cognizant of their needs and their academic aspirations and do what we can to support them as they go through our programs and on into the world of work. So with that being said, all I wanted to say is welcome. It is an honor and a pleasure to have everybody here this morning. So please enjoy your time with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Let me also thank our sponsors here this morning. Central Connecticut Chambers, Ms. Cindy Scoville is here. Cindy, wave. Thank you, Cindy. Our best of the best folks, Karen New York and Amy Richmond. But more importantly, the folks at TD Bank, you see the banner out in the front there. Patricia Hannon and John Cookley have been supportive of the initiatives that we put forward from the Chamber of Commerce, and I can't thank them enough for their great community support, which continues in the city of New Britain. I can tell you that quite nicely, so thank you. But also with them today is Mr. David Murphy. He's a regional investment director from TD Bank, and he's here from Boston, and we'd like to have him come up and say a few words. Dave, please.
Thank you, Tim. Yes, as Tim mentioned, I'm the Regional Investment Director, and I am not Senator Blumenthal. I actually did have the privilege of attending another kind of coffee house like this in Danielson, Connecticut, about 3 months ago, and it was an older crowd, let's say, in the room, and I was the only one in a jacket and tie, and someone from the news media came up and said, excuse me, are you Senator Blumenthal? But no, I'm not. I'm thankful on behalf of John Cookley and Patricia Hammond and TD Bank at large to be able to help sponsor this event and the New Britain Chamber of Commerce. In addition to being the Regional Investment Director, early this winter I was approached by our Regional President, Mark Crandall, if I would head up the Southern New England Veterans Initiative. TD Bank does take on a number of initiatives as projects, and when I say the projects, that's probably the wrong word, in that they become part of our core culture. We actively support women in leadership, the LGBTA community, and other leadership initiatives writ large. And my own story was that about 7 years ago, about this time, I was on a train to New York City with Metro North, and it was running on time this day. And I got a call from a friend of mine at CENTCOM, and the long and short of it was, the end of the conversation was, hey, can you be in Afghanistan in 90 days? We really need you there. And I kind of looked at the phone and said to myself, well, I got a daughter who's going to be a senior at Yale, another daughter who's going to be a freshman at college, and another daughter who's going, a son who's going to be a freshman in high school, and half as much money might get shot. Sure, why not? You know, it seemed like a good thing, but that's just the kind of response that you get from veterans writ large. The young men and women who are sitting here over the table would give you the same type of response. So that 6-month assignment became a 3-year assignment for myself. And when I came back to the bank, well-intended reintegration, but you know, for a bank as large as TD, really not well versed as you would think that they might be into the reintegration of bringing veterans back in who've been gone for a long deployment. So I was happy to take the challenge from our regional president, Mark Crandall, and we're really looking at three things. We're looking at recruiting, we're looking at retention, and we're looking for recognition. We want to recognize our veterans in the workforce at TD, and we want to recognize our veterans customers that come in. 2, retention. We want to be able to retain every one of our veteran employees. We want to make sure that they know that they have a career path, and we recognize the skills that they acquired while in active service for the military. And then, of course, there is certainly the recognition piece. You know, we have a number of venues in which we can recognize veterans, whether it be through the TD Garden or through other events, or myself and some others are going down to Arlington Cemetery this next weekend. You know, everyone's familiar with the Boy Scouts and other groups taking care of the flags, but there's also a lot of work that goes on in placing roses for greeting visitors, as well as placing them on every gravestone. So other types of initiatives, we're really just getting off the floor. I'd be happy to hear what some of the folks have to say here after, how we might be able to help improve upon those 3 pillars. But I thank you for the opportunity to provide sponsorship to this group. And Tim, thank you for allowing me for a few minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your service. We appreciate it. It is now my pleasure to introduce Commissioner of Veterans Affairs for the state of Connecticut, Mr. Sean Connolly. Let me just tell you a little bit about Sean. His bio is quite large, and because he's a very accomplished man, and appointed by Governor Malloy in March of 2015. He's also Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, currently serving with the 655th Regional Support Group headquartered in Westover Air Reserve Base in Massachusetts. He's also an East Hartford native, lives in Hebron, I believe. Veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He's also taught as an adjunct lecturer at the Catholic University of America. His military awards and decorations include the Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Medal, the Joint Service Commendation Medal, the Army Commendation Medal, the Army Achievement Medal, the Iraqi Campaign Medal, and the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. It's my pleasure to introduce you, Commissioner Sean Connolly.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Tim, for that great welcome. I appreciate it. Great to be back here with you at Tunxis, of course, with Karen DeBari and the veteran students here at just outside the Oasis, the Veterans Oasis, one of the best in the state of Connecticut. I've gotten a chance to get around to almost all, I think it's 17. I've gotten around to 11 or 12 of them, and this is really a fantastic one. Y'all do great work here, Karen, at Tunxis. Great to be with so many friendly faces. Mr. Crowley, thank you, as a great employer of our veterans, and all the great employers who are here as well from around the state. I've got to tell you, it's been just about a year, a little over a year, since I came in as the commissioner, and it's been a tremendous honor. A humbling experience for me to meet our veterans all around the state. We've got over 200,000 spread throughout the communities in our great state of Connecticut, from World War II on up to the present. And it's been a really, really amazing experience. Today's meeting is very important from my perspective, and I've had a little experience with transitioning myself, having served about 7.5 years on active duty. Coming in here as the commissioner, I've got the perspective of being a citizen soldier. I'm still in the Army Reserve, as Tim mentioned, and I came in from the private sector. And so my background is, it's not charity to hire a veteran. It makes good business sense for our employers here in Connecticut to hire veterans. From my perspective, again, on active duty, seeing veterans in their roles, they're well trained, they're loyal, they're dedicated, they show up on time, and transitioning those skills I've seen when I was at Pratt & Whitney just last year, one of our largest employers here in Connecticut. Working with some of the finest veterans from around the state of Connecticut there at Pratt & Whitney, being successful because of those skills, those transferable skills, leadership, professionalism, and putting that to work for our employers makes great business sense. And so it's been tremendous for me to get around and see some of the veterans and see some of our students at these schools all around the state being successful, making those transitions, and thanking the employers for welcoming those types of students into their workforce. Connecticut recognizes this. particularly through our Department of Labor. And I see Brian back there, who's one of the veterans advocates out of the Department of Labor, helping our veterans in making the transition into employment. Connecticut recognizes this with the Step Up program and granting employers up to $12,000 for a 6-month period when they hire a veteran. And so if any of our employers see that it's any way in a risk to hire a veteran, that kind of step-up program helps remove some of that risk. And so we appreciate the great work of Brian and all of our Department of Labor folks who are helping our veterans around the state. So with that, I'm glad to be here with you. I will stay here for a little bit this morning, and then I'll be heading up to Groton to recognize some of our veterans up there in Groton with the Connecticut Wartime Service Medal. But thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Karen, for welcoming me, and thank you again to Tunxis for inviting me back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate you coming and taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today. At this time, I'd like to call up Karen Noble-York, who is responsible for much of what we have here today, to introduce our next speaker.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. So I'm going to say thank you at the end as well. However, everyone might not be here, including the Commissioner at the end. So I just want to thank the list. I feel like it's the Oscars in the sense that I will forget somebody. But first of all, this would not be here today. We would not be doing this had it not been for my Director of Research with the best of the best, Amy Richmond, who lives, as Tim was saying, her parents live next door to Tim. She's a New Britain native. We've got Colleen Manning, who is also one of my core team members. And I'm about to introduce to you General Mary Saunders, who we are just delighted to have as one of our advisory board members. But the Commissioner, Karen DeBerry, all the wonderful veterans, Tunxis. This has just been an incredible, it's felt like a snowball from the minute that I will admit that I'm from the Boston area. I have lived in Connecticut for, and Amy's a New Britain native, but we're down from Boston, TD Bank, Boston, wherever you went. So it's just been, since I stepped foot in Connecticut, started talking with Tim, it's been an incredible snowball to come to today, and I just thank you all for being here. I am going to introduce Major General Mary Saunders. She came up from Dallas, so I think she beats everyone in terms of distance travel. She is Major General, U.S. Air Force, retired, currently the Executive Director of the Leadership Institute at Texas Women's University. I will repeat, I am delighted and proud to say she is on one of our advisory board members, and we've got some great advisors, but Mary's right up there at the top. Before retiring from the Air Force, General Saunders served as the Vice Director, Defense Logistics Agency in Fort Belvoir. She wants me to say very little about her, so I will not say too much more, except there are 50 medals down here, honors and medals, and including that she's in the Texas Women's Hall of Fame. But the first few of her medals are the Distinguished Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Legion of Merit with Oak Leaf Cluster, and she didn't even want me to go that far. So I'm going to stop and hand it on to Mary Saunders, General Saunders.
Good morning. Well, I have led a wonderful life. I spent 34 years in the Air Force, and I was talking to some of our young vets this morning, and of course, when I say I've been in service 34 years, they get out their calculator. And the first thing they figure out, oh my God, this woman was in the military and I wasn't even born yet. And you're absolutely right. I had a wonderful time, and during the 34 years I was in, I had 17 different assignments, moved 21 different times, spent a lot of times overseas, and worked with a lot of services. And it was my pleasure to be a part of this group, because when we talk about veterans and say, well, we're hiring veterans or not, they're a problem, or I don't want to deal with the issue, the problem is yours. Because what I do is look at what is going on globally. Yeah, never spend time down here when you need to be up here. And once I became a general for those 9 years, I worked with militaries in Egypt, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Germany, all those type places, places that if I told you I had to kill you and deny it. So, here's what's really important. One of the first things we learn in the military is when you are making any type of contingency plan, you figure out what you know. And so what I know is the world has changed and is not changing back. We look and we have global connections. We are now intermeshed with the other countries. And so I can remember all the years I was in the service, you hardly ever saw a flag flying at half-mast. Now every time there's ISIS or any other activity, the flag is flying at half-mast. And you see it often enough to realize there's a problem. So we are interconnected. And so we have to pay attention to what's going on. When you look at what you read in the paper, I'm not verifying, but what you read in the paper, they say we are in trouble in terms of education and the quality of people we have working. When I went to school, which of course was in a different millennium, then America was in the top 5 in math and science my entire life. Now we're 20 and 25. You look at the numbers in education and they say, oh, we are way down. And nobody can figure out why. Now, I know part of the reason is people don't understand that in other countries, they don't let everybody go to school. You can get to about the 6th grade, maybe the 9th grade, and you're out of there. So if you want to get an education beyond that, in a lot of instances, you have to pay for it. And we don't have to do that. And so now we're trying to figure out how you get the workforce that you need. So when we look at the perspective of hiring veterans, what you really need to be looking at is how do I get the workforce with the most talent that will give me the results that I'm looking for. And sometimes we overlook that talent. One of the things that if we look at work, it has shifted. And so we now have, if you look at the future of the workforce, and of course, you hear it all the time, the future is now. So when you look at that workforce, guess what? You have in the military some of the most talented people around. And what I say is, in the military, we're what you call sunk costs, right? You as a taxpayer have already paid for me to go to officer training school, for me to go to transportation school, for me to go to graduate transportation school, for me to get a master's degree, for me to go to Air War College for 10 months, for me to go 6 weeks when I became a general to figure out how to be a general and work with the other services, 2 weeks how to spend time doing that. So you have already paid for each and every person. So what you should be doing is reclaiming your money. And when I speak very often, people will say to me, oh my God, that was so good. That was so good. As if I were stupid. You know, I didn't quite know how to take that. And you know, my response was always, yes, those are your tax dollars at work. And if I weren't this smart, ask for your money back. And that's really where we are. This is not as hard as we think it is. We already know how much technology has changed things. It's no big mystery. I mean, you look around and you see a kid who is 2 years old, right? They have a smartphone. Then you look at people who've been around a lot longer and they're like, okay, the smartphone is giving me a headache. You know, how do we do all this? When you look at the world, at the mature economies, guess what? They need smart people. And you know as well as I do, when you look around the United States, how often are companies in this country having to import people from other countries because they say we cannot find the talent here? I didn't make it up. This is what they say. I worked with one individual, and she was working for a big technology company, and they were looking for skills, and they couldn't find what they were looking for. So she happened to have done work with the military, and she says, well, why don't you try some military people? Well, this person, a billionaire, never been in the military, has no idea. So he said, okay, I trust you. I'll take a look at it. After he was introduced to military people and their skill set, he said, you're kidding. How did we miss this? So now they have military people of every strata involved in their organization because they already had the skill set that they were looking for. But a lot of people don't understand that. Let me give you an example. When you usually we're talking about here, hiring military people and what kinds of things do you do to get them to stay. And I have to tell you, when I went to Texas Women's University, it was kind of scary to me. And I got there and I thought, wow, these people are incredible. So, the first thing they said to me, well, you certainly are direct. And I said, as opposed to what, indirect? Because I don't beat around the bush. And so what happens to us when we join the military? The first thing, they establish a sense of discipline, a sense of order, knowing how to get things done, get to the point. And I work for people who would deliberately tell you have 5 minutes to brief, from 9:21 to, 5 minutes later, and would cut you off and said, you can come back later when you're prepared, because clearly you're not, because you're still talking and your time is up. You know, so we get it. My son-in-law was so funny. He lives in Charleston, South Carolina, and so he's a banker and doesn't know anything about the military except me. And so he was in one of those situations where they have people from the community to come out and to visit the military. He called me and he talked for 45 minutes. Oh my God, I cannot believe how smart those people are. He went back the third time, he talked for an hour. He said, he said, I'm talking about young people. I'm not talking about senior people. He said, young people, on the ball, getting it done, know the answer. If they don't know the answer, somebody steps right up, and that person doesn't feel like, oh, well, they stepped on my toes because they answered my question. They're about getting it done. And he was so impressed. He said, I wish I had really understood this before, and maybe I would have joined the Air Force. And I said, bless your heart, maybe the Army, but not the Air Force either. But it's okay, we all have to do what we have to do. And one of the other things that we're looking at now is a mishmash of talent. So people are told now, how you used to acquire talent, and now, if you don't have a good LinkedIn page, good luck with that. The lady who works in my office, her son, who is a technology person in Austin, Texas, received an email from Google. They were looking for a specific talent. They looked around, they looked at his LinkedIn page and said, hey, would you come to California for an interview? He said, yes, I will. He was an older person, older, 45, not looking for a job, very happy where he was. And within 2 weeks, he became an employee of Google. He's been there 6 months, and he's already gotten Employee of the Month twice. He got a huge pay bump when he moved to Google. He got tons of Google stock, because they hired the person with the talent and the skill they were looking for. So it's no more these, I'm in Boston, so I have to hire somebody from Boston. No, I have to hire somebody with the skill set that I'm seeking, and hopefully they will move. So you look at those kinds of things. One of the other ways you get the talent you look for is you look at untapped talent. That would be us. And so once I arrived at the university, of course, they didn't really know what to expect. And after I'd been there a couple of weeks, they go, wow, she is really smart. She really gets things done. She moves fast and all that stuff. And of course, the whole time I'm saying, bless their hearts. I'm sure they're doing the best they can. But I'm not trying to be funny, but we are taught a sense of urgency. Get it done. What's the issue? How do you resolve it? And the thing I love the most, you spend no time trying to assign blame when things go wrong, right? What do? What went right? Okay, we got that much, 60%. Now what do we need to do about the other 40%? Yeah, that's what we do. And so sometimes that's why it's confusing to us if we go somewhere and somebody's still talking about the problem yesterday, today. Okay, now how far have we moved the needle toward, resolving the issue? Now we got to talk about it for about another week or two. So it makes a huge difference. So in the United States, nothing to do with veterans, we have to get on the ball because there's untapped talent here, and how far are we willing to go to use it? Let me give you one example in closing. Most of my life I worked with almost all men, and I worked in logistics, and very few non-military people. So I get the great joy of going to Columbus, Ohio, working with 7,000 civilians, and of all the people on the base, 50 of them had been in the military. So after I laid my head on my desk and say, I don't know why God is punishing me, I'm a nice person. And then I figured out, okay, what are we going to do? So what happened? My boss, who was an Army 3-star, at that time I was a 1-star, and he hated that I got the command job because he wanted some Army yokel. Sorry about that. And I got there, and he told me they spent too much money. He told me all these things about that we were doing wrong. And so he didn't invite me to sit down, so it was very clear to me he was not interested in, doing anything but telling me what I need to do. I saluted smartly, yes, sir, I got it, So I went, and I got there, and I did cry for real when I saw how bad it was. And what did I do? 2.5 years later, 2.5 years, I took 100 people to Washington, D.C., and we got one of 5 presidential level of excellence awards they give every year. 1 of 5. And how did I do that? First of all, I recognized that I'm talking to people from a different culture. I understood, and I checked, only 100 of them had ever been in the military, and that's when we first went into Vietnam, and they were still drafting people. So what did I do? I looked at the people who worked there, and I thought, I picked 7 people. I think I can work with them. I sent them to Harvard to a change management class, and they came back prepared to work. Then we started bringing people in. As I said, you got to have disciples. I don't care how great you are. I'm not Jesus Christ, therefore I don't think I can run everything. So we came in and we started working, and so what did we do? We brought in, first of all, picked a team, a real team, to start spreading the word of what we were trying to do. Number two, I invited, I called in all my chicks from every service, and we had an 18-month-long, 3 days at a time, where we had our people who knew nothing about the military for real, because when you work in procurement, all it's just a bunch of numbers. What do they know what a part is? So it's something for the Navy. So what? I don't know any different. So we had the services come in to help them understand the valuable role they play. And so if you were on a carrier and an airplane is landing and they've got 3 little metal things that will stop you because the airplane is going so fast it couldn't possibly stop without it. You hit the first one, you're fine. If you miss the second, after that, you're just in the water. So when those things are on back order, in other words, the company saying we don't have them available, that's a problem for the Navy. So they began to understand that. We had pictures put in their work area of each weapon system, because we bought for all the services for each weapon system, so they began to identify. I made sure that every month they saw the readiness rating of each weapon system, so they understood this is why it's important, because the Army can be fighting a battle over here, but they're in California in the desert training, so they need the equipment. Tanks have to keep moving. They don't have time to sit. We did all of that, and gradually we got more and more people who were excited. So within a year, they were proud to be part of the process, and that's my weapon system. I'm responsible. We worked with the people who make all the weapon systems, and I had fun with that. And so we had things that were back order. Lots of things that were back order. And you know what I did? I invited the Vice President to come and visit with us. So I did 3 slides. The first slide said, "Oh, well, welcome. We're so glad you're here." The second slide said, now this is a problem with the Navy. So they're 200 years old. I hope you enjoyed your 50th anniversary. Number 3, you are a readiness threat. So we're 90% of your business, 95% of your profit, and you really have the audacity to tell me you didn't know it, don't care, and have not figured out a way you're going to fix it. So I said, we're going to send 2 or 3 people, military people, to visit with you, and you're going to pay the tab because I'm not paying it, and we're going to see what we can do to fix it. And guess what? Again, in that 2.5 years, we went from the worst to the best. And that same organization is still the best. So I clearly understand what happens when you have to talk to people who are from a different culture. So saying that we can't understand the military, well, they're a little different, that's just a sham. We have to do better. We have talent, and we have to learn how to use it. And today, I hope we get some good answers from people who have done well. And of course, we do understand sometimes military people are scary, and there are people afraid of me, thank goodness. So I don't have a problem with that. But it really is important that we understand everybody has a culture. And I understand more than anybody with all the years that I work with all the services, because when we get ready to go to war or some contingency, you have to know who you're working with. You have to know who you're talking to. And so all the things that you heard earlier, we have the talent, we are devoted, all of those adjectives apply to us. But then the people sitting here, you have to use it. Thank you.
Didn't want to follow Mary. Please try not to fall asleep. I will do my best to be really fast, but it's hard to follow Mary. I just want to mention, if anybody needs a restroom, in case you haven't seen, they're up here. And so, the Best of the Best initiative. I founded the Best of the Best initiative, and I am an organizational consultant, but I'm going to give you a quick history, my history, so you can see hopefully how and where I came to this point of founding this initiative. Unfortunately, it's decades ago that I spent 10 years in Manhattan as a licensed mental health clinician. I primarily focused on family therapy, which is very organizationally driven. And so 10 years later, I thought, oh, I want to try something new. So I thought, well, let me transition into corporate America, which was not that easy. Talk about bias and cultural differences. Ooh, people would be terrified that I was being a shrink with them and sort of, seeing their hidden problems. And I'd say, no, if you're not paying me, I'm not paying attention. So I worked, my first job was at Bank Boston, which is now Bank of America. I headed up the diversity initiative, and I headed up the Women's Advancement Initiative. So I started being very immersed in corporate culture change, the issues, the challenges, the joys of it. And then I moved to consulting to larger corporations. Oh, is it this one? So my client list looks like this. The rest of my core team have very similar client base. These organizations are big. They're great. They're wonderful. They have wonderful people. I have been in the bowels, literally, of these organizations globally. Executive interviews, manager focus groups, employee focus groups, on 5 continents, training, executive briefings. And so I have learned a lot about both the topics that I was hired to work on, things like employee resilience, work-life, innovation, morale. But I've also learned a lot about the constant, if you will, let's say challenge to maintain high performance across an entire organization. And then I spent the last 5 years, I'm going to try this. What? Can you block that out? I spent the last 5 years re-engaging my psychotherapy license. I've been a stage in life where I can do kind of more of what I want to do, and I wanted to support the military. So that I've spent the last 5 years working with, and I worked with great people for my entire career, incredible people, as a civilian with very minimal exposure to the military. I have worked with the population to help them. My job was to help them stay on a positive trajectory, they and their families, while they are dealing with normal reactions to the abnormal situation of war. And this population just is amazing. With everything they've gone through that, frankly, most civilians can't imagine, their attitude is, man, it's a problem. How do we solve it? How do we move forward? Let's get it done. And the skill sets in terms of their core business, frankly, for private sector, high performance skill sets that they all have, no matter what their MOS, their job description is, in terms of teaming, project planning, communication, delegation. Mary was talking about that. And it was just amazing to me. So so there are a couple of stories I want to just tell. I started hearing stories as well. Stories like, of course, the military the wars are turning down and winding down, supposedly. And there are a lot of service members now entering as veterans into the civilian arena. So now, given the economic downturn in 2008, and veteran unemployment has been all over the news, right? Very, very high. Now, very, very low. But with all of that happening, and I started hearing stories from people about the veteran who walked into a company, walked into his job, saw that there were improvements to be made, tried to suggest them, told by the civilian peers, you know what, we've got this. This is how we do it here. You've got to learn to adapt to us. Has any veteran in the room ever heard this from civilian? All right. You have to adapt to us. So I see that as a lost opportunity. I'm seeing all sorts of lost opportunities for the private sector to not just integrate the individual veteran, but to integrate their skill sets. So now we can go to the next one. So, it always happens. So, something's happening strangely here. So maybe we'll just advance beyond. Okay, so veterans do outperform civilians. This they do outperform civilians by their third job. And the veterans here will not think it's surprising to see, you know, these stories of 18-year-old managing $5 million of classified equipment. How many people here have 18-year-old children? I did. I can't imagine him doing that. So, and et cetera. So they do outperform by their third job. But there is other good news. Will this not work for me? Oh, then let me do it. Okay. So veteran unemployment? No, it's not working. Why does this always happen? So anyway, veteran unemployment is going down. It's you know, I'll just stand here and I'll do it. Is it this one? So the numbers are looking good. Numbers have been the focus. People in companies, we've been focused on numbers, on hiring. Great. It's not the wrong thing to do. But now we've got premature veteran turnover on the rise. And that is not happening here. Here we go. So 18 months in the private sector on average in a first job, 24 months in government. It's expensive. It's not only expensive for the corporations, it's expensive for the individuals who are, whether they're leaving or being asked to leave. So here's a big part of the problem, culture clash. Actually, Mary was, I got his head shaking, yes. I wish we had time to make this interactive, we don't. Culture clash. And that's what I was seeing, the story of the veteran coming in saying, hey, I can improve this process, and civilians saying, no, I'm fine. That's a culture clash. The veteran came from a culture where they were trained to continuously improve, which is what private sector wants to do. That's about high performance. But it doesn't happen in reality quite often. So we're talking about the perceptions and processes and practices and principles. Those are areas where we see, when it happens, culture clash. And it usually comes around core business practices. So what we're saying is solutions developed that are hybrid, that integrate private sector best practices, military best practices, and apply those solutions in the private sector will give you, wow, look at that formatting. Okay, sorry, it will positively impact business outcomes. Veterans will become, and their expertise will become a fulcrum of organizational renewal. And, you know, it will address premature veteran turnover, because the culture clash will be addressed, if it's addressed at its roots, which are core business practices. That veteran, I asked Mary, she was talking about that story in Columbus when we were driving down here from Boston. And I said, so Mary, after all was said and done, if veterans entered that work environment, after you shifted all those practices and processes and attitudes, how do you think they would have felt? And you said?
They feel right at home.
Right at home. So, but she was still going at really concrete practices that she naturally did because the military trained her to do that, and she is smart, but the military trained her. So it would be breaking new ground. As Mary said, we think of military know-how as an untapped resource that business is not leveraging. And it would really establish a distinctive talent edge for your company. Ken Crowley, whom you'll hear later, veterans want to work with Ken because they know what his culture is like. They know how he operates. They feel that they can succeed there, that they can suggest there, that they can prosper there. So we're talking about best business performances, best high performance practices, and we're talking about mutual adaptation, not the individual veteran being expected to modify themselves to fit into the corporate practices, whether those practices are optimal or not. And just as somebody who did in the dark ages work on women's advancement, this is very much a mirror of what happened to women. Let's hire the numbers, let's bring in the women, let's bring in the individuals, we put them in the jobs, they perform or they don't, but if they don't, it was, see, women, they can't cut it, but they were asked to come into an environment and a structure that already existed, and some practices were really good and some weren't, and the talents and the offerings of women weren't utilized, and therefore now you've got veterans who actually have really core practices and skills that are immediately applicable, and the same thing is happening to them. So we're saying, they're supposed to say high speed, low drag. So let me ask you, if you see any trait, individual trait up here, that you would not want in an employee, would you raise your hand? Do you need me to read them? Can you see them? Okay. All right. And as an organization, if there's anything, okay, good time management. They don't want help. They want a job. Anything on that list of organizational attributes that you would not want? Okay, no hands are going up. So here's, through research that we've done, other research that we have aggregated, focus groups, some here with some of the Texas vets. Here's what we found and what has been consistently found. Military, organized and disciplined, anchored in high personal trust. Integrity is a core value. They get to private industry, they say, disorganized. No standard operating procedure. No personal trust. Cutthroat. These aren't extreme. This comes frequently. These responses frequently. Not given to opportunities to develop and prove new capabilities. We're in the military proficient in core multiple disciplines. Personal responsibility and accountability are key values. Accountability and initiative are lacking. Highly team-oriented, individually oriented, selfish. One quote that I thought was particularly interesting was, in the military, it takes every man to run a ship. In private sector, every man is a ship, his own ship. For skills, team development, instead of solid training and experience. Report directly and deal with problems, poor performance, or mistakes go unreported or unaddressed. Indirect or no communication, getting the drift. So in terms of organizational contrast, leadership by example, instead of, in the military is coaching, only at senior levels. No clear career path. It's quite regularly that corporate surveys will find that 70-75% of civilian employees are not happy with their career path. They're very frustrated with their career development. Poor execution is not always a grave concern. In the military, somebody may die if you don't execute. And so something the military has to learn, and mutual adaptation is, as my granddaughter would say, don't freak out if something isn't exactly where it should be. But still, the sense of urgency that Mary talked about in Columbus is just often not there in the private sector. And that is not an ingredient of high performance. Lack of timely, clear feedback, no or little training. So, just a couple of data points. The service members seem clear that civilians appreciate and respect their service. Only 1 out of 2 basically feels that their skills and training are appreciated. And I'm just gonna, these are other, I'm not gonna read for the sake of time, read all of these, but they all add up to, again, the issue that corporate culture is and that clash between the military perceptions, processes, practices, and procedures and private sector is really it's like an invisible underpinning of inefficiency. And again, the bottom quote is, the point at the bottom quote about the managers, the challenges that HR managers cite is really just to say it's all about this, the veterans aren't changing, the veterans aren't accommodating. So let's look at the civilian population for a minute. Civilian employee engagement has been stagnant. It's been hovering at about 30. It's really high now. It's 32% for about 20 years. That's expensive because there's also around 17.5% to 18% on average actively disengaged. So engaged people are passionate. They give their discretionary effort. They go the extra mile. 50-something% are not engaged. That means they're just kind of going through the motions. They're getting their job done, but they're not giving you what they really could. The actively disengaged are destructive. They are employees who really want to do harm. They sabotage. They're angry. They they infect the work environment. Gallup, who's responsible for this data, says that the American workplace loses $450 to $550 billion a year because that's 18% of actively disengaged. And it's invisible. Companies don't see this, they don't know this. Now, what makes somebody engaged? I mean, again, if you just, about clear expectations, having the opportunity to do my best, being recognized or rewarded, having my development encouraged. People care about me. People talk to me about my progress. I have opportunities to learn and grow. You who are in the military, does that sound like at least how it's supposed to go? Would you raise your hand? That's kind of the culture of the military. It's sorely lacking, is a broad cultural practice. And the 30% engaged shows that. Now this is Fred Smith. Everybody knows FedEx, right? But you might not know that Fred Smith was a Marine. He fought in Vietnam. But before that, he was a Yale student, economics. He submitted a paper to his professor. This is in the 70s, and or maybe late 60s actually. And he outlined FedEx. What grade did he get? A C. Why? It was logical, it made sense, but it could never happen. It was impossible. So he then went into the Marines and fought and was discharged as a captain in 70. Then he used his paper to establish FedEx, but he also used all of the learnings he took from his time in the Marines, the logistics, the procurement, delivery systems. And he says he doesn't think he could have built FedEx without the Marines. He was ranked by Fortune magazine on the list 26th among the world's greatest leaders. And if you read these quotes, you can see, I feel, the influence of the military. It's about getting my men to do work better than I can. It's not about being top dog. It's about looking after your people. All those lists of items from the Gallup engagement survey really talked about people not being happy if they're not cared about, if they're not developed, if they're not trained. They don't have a sense of mission, a sense of inclusion in the organization. So veterans, what happens? Veterans, they enter the service, they transform. They are transformed by the, frankly, organizational technology of the military to execute and win. They go, more lately, last decade, to combat. They come home. They transition back, and then they get helped. So, what do I mean by that? If you look at all of these wonderful and well-intentioned veteran support organizations, the subliminal message, the subliminal message is that, look at it, help, on behalf, charity, wounded. What's happening in the mindset of the civilian population is we have to help our vets. Has anybody experienced that? I have, my nephew's a Marine major, and I don't see him that often. I saw him about a month ago, and I said, hey, you want to hear what I'm doing? And I said, you know how civilians want to help veterans? He said, stop, we do not want that. So I said, yeah, don't jump on me, I'm trying to work on it. So what should change? We are saying the narrative has to change. The mindset that's created by this narrative, and I hope people walk out of here today and help change these narratives, is we have to help veterans. They're heroes or they're victims. Chris King works with Veterans Affairs in Massachusetts. He's an Annapolis grad, a Harvard Kennedy School of Government grad. He's been with the State Department. He is a Navy, obviously he was in the Navy, intelligence officer. And he said in his experience, civilians are always, veterans say they're always calling us heroes or they're calling us victims. We are neither. We did our job. We did it well. That's what we are. We are neither. And this makes them feel isolated, Chris says. PTSD. Anybody here who's a veteran, ever encountered anybody who's afraid you might have PTSD? And you might Go Postal. Go Postal started in '86. I have a dear friend, I won't give you the story, but severe PTSD from Vietnam, and he's married, Dartmouth, Notre Dame Law, 3 kids. He still has it today, but he's never attacked anybody. This is really a problem. Somebody who works in a major corporation, has veteran services, said that somebody from the HR next door, the HR department, came into her. She had just gone to a seminar on PTSD, and she walked in. They already have thousands of veterans. She walked in and said, well, since we want to hire more veterans, I went to this seminar. Do you think, what kind of services should we put, structures should we put in place to in case, PTSD, in case somebody goes postal. So, suicide. Suicide is awful for everybody. I have worked with service members whose brother has committed suicide. It is awful. But this isn't to say suicide doesn't matter. There's an article from the New York Times in April that talked about the rate of suicide in the United States is ratcheting up hugely across all categories. One data is 10 to 14-year-old girls, the numbers are low, but their suicide rate has tripled recently. So the problem is, again, the narrative is civilians, because it's been on the TV, it's been all about support. This is another part of a narrative that says veterans need help, veterans are wounded, veterans have problems. So, veterans can choose to stay in the organization they're joining and adapt or contribute with their civilian partners. They can withdraw, they feel isolated, but the potential know-how that they can contribute is lost. So we're saying, change the paradigm. Change the narrative, change the paradigm. Not from one of, let's fix the veterans or help the veterans fix themselves or deal with them. They need to fix, women need to fix themselves. We're saying, change it to mutual adaptation. Integrate the know-how, the expertise, systematically into your organizations of applicable military know-how, and you will see more engagement with civilians as well. So we're talking about practices such as teaming, strategy execution, planning. These are core practices that are PricewaterhouseCoopers, Harvard Business Review, McKinsey, Project Management Institute has real data that there's a lot of opportunity to improve. And the state right now is such that, this problems or challenges in these core areas is reducing companies' ability to innovate, to achieve forecast growth, to achieve financial targets. So, change the performance is the last piece we think needs to be. If you make these other changes, the performance will change. There are huge gains that companies who do execute well, who do manage projects well, who do, they are agile. All of these attributes, these companies really have incredible, 5 times more likely to deliver strong, sustained performance. A good project manager wastes 13 times less money. That same study said only about 53% of companies say they manage projects well. So, veterans, entrepreneurs, one last point. Veterans are very entrepreneurial, and that's been demonstrated. And large corporations who are dying for entrepreneurs are losing veterans who are entrepreneurial to their own business because they can't deliver the way they want to in large companies. So that's that. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing Senator Blumenthal. I don't think I have to say too much about him to you people from Connecticut. He is well known around the country for advocating many issues. And I think you've set a record as Attorney General in terms of the number of times you were Attorney General in Connecticut. Senator Blumenthal is the ranking member of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee in the 114th Congress. He started in the Senate in 2011. And he's introduced with Senator McCain the Clay Hunt Suicide Prevention for American Veterans Act. And most recently, he joined with Chairman Isaacson, championing the Veterans First Act, a bipartisan bill to change the culture at the Department of Veterans Affairs. So thank you very much. Senator Wilson.
thank you so much, Karen. That was really extraordinarily insightful and helpful. I appreciate it.
Thank you. There are people who sometimes wish they couldn't hear me, I can tell you. Including probably the deer that I hit on the way here. I apologize for being late, but it was the result of a close encounter with a deer on the Merritt Parkway, and everybody's fine, except maybe for the deer. I want to, first of all, thank Karen again. For those who didn't hear the first time around, thank you for that very insightful and important presentation. And I want to pick up on something that she mentioned, which is very important to me. I began championing the cause of veterans when I was still Attorney General. And she's right, I was Attorney General for a record number of years, 20 years. We have 4 children, and my youngest once asked me whether I was going to be the eternal general. But I want to thank all of those who've been involved in working on this cause for so many years. And beginning, of course, Tim Stewart, thanks for having the Chamber focus on this issue. Sean Connolly, as Commissioner, has really broken new ground and led the way in so many areas. And I want to thank Major General Mary Saunders for her leadership. Thank you so much. And most especially Ken Crowley, who has been an entrepreneur, but also someone who cares so deeply about veterans and has hired a lot of them. He and I have talked about expanding his best practices to other companies and other industries. So I thank him. And my longtime friend, Michael Thomas, who is a veteran himself, a decorated U.S. Navy commander, and formerly a colleague of mine in my office. And of course to Alex Cruz for being here as well. Thank you. This cause is one that is a passion of mine. I worked with John McCain on that Clay Hunt veteran suicide prevention bill because 22 veterans every day in our nation commit suicide. 22. Greatest, strongest nation in the history of the world. 22 veterans every day commit suicide. And he and I, together, in a very bipartisan way, worked on a bill that we named for Clay Hunt, a Marine who came back from Afghanistan with PTS, needed help, mental health care. Just as when you break a bone, you need help. No different when you suffer from PTS, although it's an invisible wound of war. And the VA failed him. He slipped between the cracks and he took his own life. And Clay Hunt's mom championed this measure to provide more research and more care, not only for those who suffer from mental health issues, but also for their families. And together we passed that measure, Senator McCain and I, and together we went to the White House for the bill signing. And next to us, as we stood with the president, he signed the bill, was Clay Hunt's mom. And in the audience was Joanna Eldridge, whose husband, Justin, also took his own life, a Marine who also came back from combat and slipped between the cracks. For anyone who says Washington can't get anything done, the lesson of the Clay Hunt Veteran Suicide Prevention Bill is we can and we must. We can if we work together in a bipartisan way and regard compromise as part of what we do. It's not a dirty word. It's something that you do every day when you make a deal, when you sell a product, or you hire someone, or you reach out to colleagues in trying to solve problems together. And I think the experience of the Veterans Affairs Committee in crafting the Veterans First bill is another lesson in compromise and bipartisan work together. The chairman and I, chairman is Johnny Isaacson, who's a Republican from Georgia, one of the most decent, honorable guys you'll ever meet. And he and I worked together on this bill that is designed to change the culture. Another point that Karen made, change the culture at the VA. As you know, the VA has suffered some horrendous problems in accountability, debacles and scandals at Phoenix and around the country in delays in providing health care because of inadequate resources in part, but also because they fraudulently cooked the books and concealed problems. And this measure will hold bad actors accountable. Make sure people are fired and other people are hired. It will also prohibit bonuses for poor performers, something that happens in government, unfortunately. And it will protect whistleblowers. People who come forward, speak truth to power, complain about wrongdoing, should not be victims of retaliation or revenge. It also expands the services that are available for skill training and education. Very important to your hiring people. I go around the state, people tell me there are jobs open, just not people with the right skills. Today at Electric Boat or Pratt or Sikorsky, major defense contractors, and at their suppliers and components makers, you can find openings, but not the right skills. So this measure aims to provide those skills to veterans and their spouses and dependents, for the first time expanding that program. So it's not just the veterans whom you should be seeking to hire, it's their families, because they are in service as much as the veterans. And it enables veterans who find themselves victims of predatory practices at Corinthian, a for-profit college, now bankrupt. A lot of veterans lost their GI benefits as a result. Absolutely outrageous. And this measure makes it possible for them to recover those GI benefits. They lost them through no fault of their own. They should not be victims of Corinthian, and they should be made whole. The bill also provides major aid in homeless programs. It eliminates or seeks to eliminate the massive backlog in the appeals of disability claims. It improves services for other kinds of issues relating to health care and the community care and the community programs. So when veterans can't get care within 30 days or live farther than 40 miles away from a VA facility, they will have access to private providers. It streamlines that process. There are other very important innovative steps in this program, including expanding the programs for care at home for wounded veterans or aging veterans. The veterans, like everyone else, would rather live at home as they age or if they have issues that prevent them from going out. And yet we provide almost no aid for the caregivers, family members, spouses, children who care for veterans in their home. They bear that burden. We should be helping them. This bill will do it. Veterans First Act is now on the floor of the United States Senate. I hope it will be passed, just as the Clay Hunt Veteran Suicide Prevention Bill was passed, with an overwhelming bipartisan majority. It was supported in our committee by almost every Republican and almost every Democrat. Overwhelming support there. That is the kind of support that we owe our veterans. We in Washington should be doing our job to help them. You are doing your job in seeking to hire them. There is a all too little used and largely unknown provision of law called the Vow to Hire Heroes Act, which provides tax credits. Hope you'll look into it. It's been around for a while. I helped to pass it and then to renew it. It provides for tax credits that vary in amount according to how long a veteran has been unemployed and whether he or she has a disability. And there are increased availability of credentialing benefits. Used to be if you drove a truck in the military, you might have a military license, but you had to go through all of the education in many states, driver's education, literally driver's education, even though some of these veterans had driven in Afghanistan and Iraq through roads filled with IEDs, improvised explosive devices. They had to go through driver's education to drive a truck in many of our states. Credentialing is being overcome, but still a problem. So we have to do our job in Washington. I would like to hear from you as to how you think we can do it better so you can hire more of our nation's heroes. I am not going to shirk that word. They are our nation's heroes. Two of my sons have served. One in the Marine Corps Reserve in Afghanistan. He's back safely now, and he's now a veteran. Another is currently serving. Our second son, Michael, is serving in the Navy. We owe our nation better, our nation's heroes better. And so I thank you very, very much for your interest. Your being here today shows your interest and your involvement and engagement in this issue. Connecticut has always stood strong for its veterans. And Tunxis, by the way, has pioneered and championed the cause of veterans by establishing its oasis, one of the most active and important in the state, just down the hall, literally. And I've met with many veterans in that oasis a number of times here at Tunxis. Tunxis cares about veterans. Thank you to the Britain Chamber of Commerce for showing you care, and thank you all for being here today. God bless our great country on this Memorial Day.
So we are going to move into the panel discussion right now. Ken, Michael, Alex, if you would come up and sit in these chairs. And Amy, could you see if you could get those mics to work? Yep. Thank you. So, also, if you're from Connecticut, I don't know that you need any introduction to Crowley Auto Group, but I'm going to give you. Can we do my own mic? That's you're each going to have your own mic. Alex, front and center there, works for Ken. He is Ken's internet manager and salesman at Crowley Ford in Lincoln. He started as a salesman in May of 2012 and became one of Ford and Crowley's top salesmen for the past 4 years in a row. He's a Hartford Public High School graduate and retired from the Marine Corps as a sergeant after 9 years of service. He is a family man. He's been married to Cindy for 12 years, and he has Alicia, a daughter, and son Derek, both of whom have autism as children. After completing 5 tours of duty, Alex acted as translator on the island of Vieques, Puerto Rico, completed, as I said, 5 tours of duty. He deployed during Operation Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. He has served as both a motor transport operator and a convoy commander to over 300 combat logistical convoys. Michael Thomas. Commander Michael Thomas. He grew up in New Haven, and he has a JD from Yale Law. He He entered the Navy in 1995, where he served as an intelligence officer in Kosovo as part of Operation Allied Force under General Wesley Clark. He returned to Connecticut in 2008 and joined, as you now know, Senator Blumenthal's office as Senior Advisor for Veteran Military and Defense Affairs. He, with support from the Small Business Association and the Patriot Express program, he founded Archangel Ventures, LLC, and through that opened a Subway franchise that would be owned and managed by veterans. His efforts to provide opportunities for veterans to start and manage their own business led him to receive the Veteran Small Business Champion Award for his efforts. He joined a company, Seraph Care, Inc., which is a VA-certified venture owned by service-disabled veterans. It provides chronic care management services. He, since 2014, has been the president and CEO. He has received several military honors, including the Bronze Star and the Defense Meritorious Service Medal. And in 2013, he was inducted into the Connecticut Veterans Hall of Fame. Now, Ken Crowley, who is founder and president of the Crowley Auto Group, Ken is a business leader, but he is also an incredible community leader. He is well known in the his enterprise actually includes a broad range of domestic and international brands. He's one of the top automotive dealerships in the state of Connecticut. He is well known, though, in the veteran community as a longtime supporter and employer of veterans. In 2008, Crowley Auto became one of the first members of the U.S. Army Reserve's Employer Partnership Program. Ken has received the 7 Seals Award to honor a wide array of support given to service members from all 7 reserve components. The high regard in which Ken is held in the veteran community is reflected in the many awards he's received, including the presentation by a veteran of a U.S. flag that had flown over Afghanistan and Iraq. Literally, if you walk into this conference room, it is lined with coins and statues and awards. But he has incredible list of community activities, including support of Operation ELF and Embracing Lonely Families, which is a National Guard initiative, and he was recognized as a top contributor in 2011. After 19 years, in 2015, the Crowley tournament, JDRF tournament, has raised $1 million to help the fight against juvenile diabetes, and he's also received the Bartlett Barnes Distinguished Service Award, the JDRF Promise Ball honoree in 2016, and Star of Hope recipient. And the list goes on, including the fact that he was a founding sponsor of the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island Restoration Fund in 1986 in conjunction with Lee Iacocca. So, having said that, do all your microphones work?
Yep, they're good.
Yeah, is yours working, Ken? No? No?
Who is on? Who is on the Windows?
No, green, try that now.
Who is on?
Hello, hello,
Push it again and see what happens.
hello, hello.
More power. So let's start with you, Michael. And while Amy gets another, so I asked, we had some incredible, mesmerizing discussions actually getting ready for today. And they went on for 2.5 hours, and we are over time today too. So I want to just launch into it. If you each would briefly give a sense of your lives, your personal lives, just a little kind of to bring the audience up to speed as to where you are now, a little bit, in addition to what I stated.
Sure. So after graduating from law school in 95, I joined the Navy, and a lot of people thought, oh, well, you know, he's going to be a JAG. I wasn't smart enough to do that. So I went in the intelligence world, and I can't believe how quickly the time goes by. I had no intention at first of staying in the military, but I got there, and my first operational tour went to Kosovo, as Karen said, with General Clark, and was part of the team that got to do some amazing things. It was very quickly thereafter that I knew I wasn't going to be in the military for a short period of time as I was. But I got back from Kosovo, took a tour at the Defense Intelligence Agency in Washington, and was there on September 11th. 2001. Lost some good friends that day. Was almost not able to be present with you all today that day. And so I stayed, and I stayed mostly because you never leave your friends in a fight, ever. And people say, oh, well, you know, very patriotic and this, that, and the other, which I appreciate. But something that's been said here before, and so I won't browbeat it, but the culture of the military is something that I consider a core part of myself. We never leave a fallen comrade behind, and we execute the orders that we're given to the best of our ability. Fast forward, when I got back from Afghanistan in 2008 and transitioned out of active service into the reserve and went into the private sector, one of the most challenging things for me was not having that culture, not having that support system, and not having those people around me who thought like I did, worked as I did, and usually put self before, or team before self. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Sergeant Cruz Alexander, actually, before I became that said title, I was born and raised in Hartford. I was a child of a father that died of an overdose of drugs. Not afraid to say that now. I became something better because of it. I could have been a lost cause at the age of 17, and instead I decided to join the Marine Corps. Joined right before 9/11, and became even more motivated after 9/11. And something that goes to say that ties into what we're doing today is, if you guys remember where those towers hit, a lot of you guys stood up, took a step back, and were just taken back. People like myself, Lieutenant Commander next to me, got up and took steps forward. And those are the people that were telling you guys to hire, please, because that's who we are. Once I joined the Marine Corps, went to boot camp, did the same old 3 months in the Tunxis of hell, I guess it's that. And became a squad leader, and from there, I just wasn't, it wasn't enough. I'm built from a mold that we're never satisfied. We want to keep moving forward, and we want to keep going. And that's what I brought to Ken College world when I went into his business and went in. Didn't know what I was doing. Never sold a car in my life. Became one of the top salesmen for the region. I'm on my 4th award now through Ford, and now I'm actually unit manager at Crowley Ford. I hope not to stop there, and I'm just going to keep moving forward because that's what we do.
Thank you, Ken.
Well, let me add to that. Is this working?
Yes.
Alex was recently promoted to the position he's in. Everything he said is absolutely true. He didn't know anything. We met him at a job fair. My human resource manager, fortunately for her, on vacation today, but she'd be here. But we attend those, and she met Alex and said, no, she liked him. She came back and told me something special with him, and she was absolutely right. So we brought in Alex, but I just wanted to add to what he said. He was recently promoted, and he didn't give us a choice to even think about anyone else. And that's quite a credit to him. He wouldn't let me hire anyone else because I couldn't, because he was doing the job so well and has for so long. He has the work ethic. He's a perfect example of why, one of the reasons why I'm involved with veterans. And it makes me feel very good that he has taken to our business so well, which is a wonderful business, and there's great opportunities for people in it. And I'll get to that in my own case. I grew up on the streets of Waterbury, Connecticut. We always had something to eat, but we certainly weren't wealthy. I didn't inherit the gene pool, so some of my peers today are third and fourth generation dealers, which I'm glad I'm glad I'm not. I used to repair cars, and somebody asked me one day if I'd like to sell them, and I did. I sold for about 11 years, only wanting an opportunity to do better, and maybe have my own business. And a gentleman offered me the opportunity to run a brand new Chrysler store in Thomaston, Connecticut, and that started. Subsequently bought out my competitor. Not that I had any money. I guess sometimes you're stupid and you don't know the dangers, so you walk in. But this was a family operation in Bristol, Connecticut, and the youngest member of the family died. He was the one that ran it. So they lent me the money to buy them out. Didn't have any money myself. I had a wife and 2 small children, and gave me an opportunity. That was in 1971. And we started, and we never looked back. I'm blessed with great employees, one of which is sitting right here next to me. Somewhere in your presentation you said that, or somebody said, about surrounding yourself with good people. Well, that's the story of my success. I have employees who can do certain functions way better than I can, and that's why we work together as a team. That's one of the reasons why we're involved in veterans. But I have to tell you how I really got started being involved in veterans. At the end of the Vietnam War, I observed men and women being spit upon. That burned in my mind that I said, this is so wrong. And that started my dedication to the military and working with people that come out of the military. We love to hire military people. They're disciplined, they follow directions, they're energetic, they have one objective in mind: get the job done. In my company, we employ 350 people, and we have, out of that 350, 50 have been with me more than 20 years. I take that as a great compliment, and there's many that are almost at 22. So we like to hire people without experience. We like to train them. The military is the training ground that makes that happen for us, and it's great. Last year, as an organization, we sold and delivered 12,000 cars, just in Bristol and Plainville. That's the story of my son.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. So let's talk a little bit about, you've already outlined, Ken, some of the qualities you see in veterans that draw you to them and them to you. But if you could just spend a couple of minutes talking about the culture that you have, and maybe Alex can chime in because you experience that culture. But one of the striking things to me when I first met Ken was, as an example, I talked earlier about changing the narrative. We're not going to help our veterans. They don't want help. Well, Ken, while he's an advocate for veterans, he wants to hire as many as possible. One thing I've noticed about your culture is the first thing that any applicant has to do is to go through with his HR head an evaluation. So if you don't align with the company according to this evaluation, whether you're a veteran or not, they're not going to consider you. So there's no special treatment. It's a level playing ground. Some of the other, if you will, attributes of your culture that you think, and Alice, just chime in here, that you think makes it a place where veterans actually are drawn to work?
Well, we all come from the same cut of cloth. Alex, the general manager in our Fort Lincoln store, I used to say he's a Marine veteran, and he quickly will correct me that you are always a Marine. So he's a Marine. And I think that he and Alex hit it off pretty good because they share a lot of the same disciplines and dedication to doing the job right. And I'm so proud of Alex. He's one of our shining stars. And not that other veterans we've hired aren't doing a commendable job, but Alex in particular, with his background, growing up in the north end of Hartford, his dad, problem, mother didn't speak English. In fact, she lied because he told me.
I was not translating properly when my mom signed those documents for me to go to the Marines. I was still 17 years old. I had a mission in mind, and I at all costs I was going to meet him.
And you know, that's another thing about the military. A lot of people, we had an extraordinary, four of us, had an extraordinary conversation last week. And one of the things that I said, and I thought some of the problems that we're facing in the workplace, society, everything, is the breakdown of the family unit. And, you know, that is so critical. And a lot of people find that family in the Marine Corps. And, you know, I try to inculcate that feeling in our organization if we can. We're concerned about our people, very concerned, and, you know, what happens to them. And they know when that is hyperbole or when it's true. And that all, you know, little bites of the apple make the difference between success and failure. And a lot of these things, as I said earlier, you know, I can't do this without our people. I'm not smart enough, and I'm not talented enough to do that. But they can, and I try to be the catalyst that puts it all together. And again, being blessed with people that have been loyal with me, some of them right from the very beginning, 47 years ago.
But it's a two-way street. I mean, it's a clear mutual admiration society. It's a two-way street. You're talking about a culture where you really demonstrate caring. Remember the Gallup engagement factors. Caring. I'm going to just list it here, things we talked about when we were having this amazing conversation. Absolute two-way respect. Ken's HR person chimed in and said, he's all about innovation. How can we do something new? What new can we do here? All about continuous improvement, all about finding the best way, all about being dedicated to the people and expecting them to be dedicated back. You said it's a cutthroat, your business can be very cutthroat, and it's all about competitive advantage. It's all about bottom line. It's not out of any type of charity or special treatment. Let me ask Michael and Alex, if talking about Ken's talk about, and your veterans are amazing people, and as Alex noted, there is a process that the military takes you through, and training, real training, skills training, that's, for behaviors that's expected in the private sector, I can tell you not always well trained or embedded in the private sector. So why don't you talk a little bit about the technology, if you will, the training that you guys, or Michael, maybe you could start, that you experienced that
Sure. Well,
that apply to.
So one of the things you hear, or at least I've heard a lot, There are lots of jokes about making things sailor-proof or marine-proof or airman, right? I mean, everyone hears that. And so my first sort of experience with this was in 95, I graduated, May 95, I graduated from Yale Law School. I thought I was pretty squared away, knew what I was doing. I showed up in Pensacola, Florida for officer candidate school. And within about 30 seconds, I was disabused of any notion that I was competent to do anything. I mean, I didn't know how to walk, I didn't know how to talk, I didn't know how to make my bed, I didn't know how to tie my shoes. I knew how to do nothing, right? And there was a very salty Marine Corps drill instructor who drove that point home. And while it seems silly, the process the military uses, officer candidate school or boot camp, to break people down, give them common experience, but also to focus on details. Really focus on attention to detail. Any and everything up to and including something as silly as tying your shoes is a trait that has served me well individually, but also as an employer, something I look at in my employees. Right? If someone is willing to take something that simple seriously, I have no concerns that they're going to take things upstream as if not more seriously. And that's not something you get every day. It's not something that's taught in most schools. And the military is very intentional about that particular training. And I think it's one of the hallmarks of the culture. And so the other thing is there's a great equalizer, right? It doesn't matter where you came from, what you did before. When you get to that initial training, you are all equally worthless, as Staff Sergeant Anderson, United States Marine Corps would say. And you have to earn the right to wear that uniform, right? And there are people who don't make it, not for lack of trying, but it is not easy. And so another great part of this is it shows how flexible military members are. We are eminently trainable, right? I mean, and we're not afraid of doing the work that it takes to gain an expertise. And a lot of that's just repetition, constant repetition. Build muscle memory. I remember the first command I walked into, my first actual fleet command was VF-14 out of Oceana. And there was a sign on the wall that said, in actual combat, you will not rise to the occasion, but you will fall to the level of your training, combat training in progress. And that has stuck with me. And that's the attitude that all the folks that I know who have gone through have stuck with. Because once you engage in an activity, if you're not well trained, and Mr. Crowley, from what I have heard and talked with Alex about, is all about training and making sure his people have the best materials that they need to get the job done, to know how to get it done, and they outperform.
Well, one great thing that I noticed, right, as soon as I got to Crowley, compared to some of the temp agencies that I went through when I was trying to, kind of go into the civilian world, but one thing that I noticed once I got into Crowley was general manager being a Marine, he already had a thought process of what I was going to do. He already knew how I was going to perform. There was no question about it. I got there, he showed me how to fill out a sales form and told me, go through it. There was, other than that, he's like, I have the most, knowing that you're going to outperform. So here's how you fill this out, here are the cards, and go sell them. And that's exactly what I did. And he knew that. As a Marine, he knew how I was going to perform. And unfortunately, you don't get that everywhere you go. You don't get that confidence in your fellow employee when you hire them, that you're going to know for a fact that he's going to outperform. From day one in the Marine Corps, once we get broken down and reshaped, we get taught to work as a team. I know his capability because we went through training together, whether it was 10 decades, a decade ago, 2 decades ago. I know he went through the same training I went through. Jim Brooks, which is the general manager, went through decades ago, back in the 60s. But yet again, he had the same confidence in me, knowing that I went through in 2000. the same training that he went through. And that's the confidence that we have in each other. And that's all we want to do for companies is install that type of confidence that we have in each other with our fellow employees. And I think that's very important because once you know that he had the same training and I had the same training, we know how we're going to perform and we can count on each other.
And you were?
I'm sure, excuse me, I'm sure that there's some business owners out here or whatever, and believe me, veterans are a gold mine of talent. Do we always win? No. We have some defeats. Some veterans, like ordinary people, because they are, don't make it. But for the most part, the training that you hear from here, and that you heard me say a moment ago, he wouldn't let me hire anyone else. Not that he stood there and twisted my arm, but, I couldn't hire anyone else. This man is going to be good in whatever. And the interesting thing was, my general manager said that to me, and we all felt that way before he started. And, you get confidence in people and whatnot, but when they really perform and you watch them, and my general manager kept saying, one of the leaders of our company, right here, this is going to be. And he's proving that to be a true statement, because whatever he does, he has to do well. There's not a lazy bone in this man's body. And again, I'm telling you that there's some great opportunities with the military. You got to give them a chance. We got to give back. After all, we sit home fat and happy, and they're dodging bullets so that we can do that. And I never, ever lose sight of that or the gratitude for that.
Let me just, thinking again, it's worked with you guys. And I think everyone here has had experience with it not working. So thinking about the current, if you will, challenge for business of this, phenomenon of veteran turning over in the first job around 18 months to 24 months. Can you all talk briefly to what it is in a culture? I know, Alex, you had worked in a couple of other companies. What is it that you think that that corporate culture, business culture, could adopt more of, to be, not to be nice to veterans, but to, if you will, promote high performance and also promote the comfort of veterans in that culture? And then a few words about what you think veterans might, some modifications they might have to make, because, Marine boot camp, everybody's not going to go through that, be in that, or tolerate somebody treating them as though they're in Marine boot camp.
We don't, I don't want to mislead you. We have a lot of people that are plain ordinary folks that haven't been in the military. They come in every day, they do their job. But we have found, and they're great people also. We found that your likelihood in helping these people, military, is that you're going to win. But you have to show everyone that you care. From the time you hire them, you referred to my psychological profile of people. You got to put the round peg in the round hole, and I'm sure there's everyone out here knows that. And we try to do that because Alex is a perfect example again. He didn't know that he would thrive in our business. It's a tough business, let me tell you, but it's a wonderful opportunity. You can do very well in it. I'm an example of that. And he's found something that he can do, but we showed him, we trained him. We made sure that before we hired him, he was the round peg going in the round hole. And that the military background was with him, that even solidified the decision.
Okay, and then Michael and Alex, last comments to this point?
To go to that short term, it took me a long time to get used to some companies and how they ran things. it's something as small as not showing up to work on time. I mean, that bothered me to the core. That is a huge pet peeve of mine, and I saw things like that, and it went by. Like nobody really cared about it. That showed me signs of a company I shouldn't be working for. Because in all honesty, if everybody had the same standards and everybody treated each other with respect, everybody would show up to work on time. And by on time, I mean early. Because if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. If you're late, don't bother showing up. And that's the way we live. Another thing is, when I took the internet job at Carly Ford, I mean, he keeps telling you guys that I was perfect for it. In all honesty, I'm scared of technology. I flip phone the entire time I was a Marine because I never used it, I never needed it. Now I know I have the smartphone, I have the Note 5, and God forbid I learn anything on that. My kids do everything on that. I know how to draw the pen out and write notes on it. But I can do the job because I have confidence that I can do the job. I've progressed in the job, and I am doing as good as the last internet manager, possibly even better. It takes me a little longer to do it, but at the end of the day, it's hard work that pays off. It's not the fact that I know the job, it's not the fact that I am the best internet manager in the world, but I can tell you right now that I'm there at 8:30 when we open at 9, and half the time I leave at 9 o'clock when we close at 8. I have a schedule where I'm supposed to leave at 5. Half the time I don't, because if I have to put the extra hours to outperform the last guy, I'm going to do that, and that's just how we're built.
You're built, and I just want to comment that you've talked about, and I know I've experienced dealing with military, there's a lot of training that goes into making you believe, and you can be ultimately and infinitely almost adaptable, learn and do anything, apply yourself. A few, just a couple parting comments.
Sure. So the last thing I'll say is, and this is from two perspectives. One, as a member transitioning back into the civilian world, the real world. As I said, the culture shift was hard for me, and for a while I couldn't figure out why, because even though I'd been in the military for a long time, I thought of myself as pretty much a civilian, right? Because I was a civilian most of my young life and developing life. But then it really kicked in when I started hiring people. And for me, and I think one of the biggest takeaways from the business side is when military members come to you in a company, they're accustomed to leaders who have vast control and interest in all aspects of their life. And you have to. From a military commander's point of view, right, nothing was more important to me than everything that was going on in my sailors. Had to know. And I had to make the way as smooth for them as I possibly could. Why? Because, to Ken's point, I can't do their jobs. I got to make sure that nothing is bothering them at all so that they can do their jobs to the utmost when the time comes. That's my job. Making sure that they can do what they need to do when they need to do it. You get to the civilian world, and I know I maybe mistakenly expected some of the folks that I was working for to have that same sort of interest in me, and they didn't. Conversely, some of the civilians that came to work for me found it incredibly overbearing that I was pushing and prying to find out things that were going on with it that they considered completely private. So that's one very concrete cultural difference that I think just the understanding of can make a huge difference to folks coming back into the civilian workforce from the military. And I think it's a conversation for those of you who are in business who don't have military experience. You can have that conversation directly. They're not going to hurt anyone's feelings. It's not going to scare them. In fact, to Gerald Saunders' point, most military folks that I know prefer direct conversations of that sort of nature. They're really not afraid of what, and I never heard this term until I got into the civilian world, challenging conversations. Still not really quite sure what that is, but it's out there.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
There's one thing I'd like to say in regards to the veterans, and I didn't originate this, a guy named Abraham Lincoln that we all know. To care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow, and for his orphan. Think about it.
Thank you. That was great. So it's 5 of 11. You may have noticed. And so our agenda had included some discussion groups, but deers and things like that got in the way. And so we are going to end within 5 minutes. What I'd like to do, is ask, does anybody either have a question, or do you have, I'm wondering if anybody's had heard something new today or has a new thought based on anything you heard today. Any takeaways that you want to?
Yeah, my name is Brian DeConto. I work for the Department of Labor, and I guess what everybody wants to know is, where do I find these vets?
Well, I got the answer to that. Each of our offices, we've got 5 offices throughout the state. We have a veteran team, which I'm part of. And all you got to do is give us a call and say, hey, Brian, I'd like to hire a vet. What I have in my files, everything from attorneys to landscapers, so I got a large variety. Now, if you're tech savvy, like Mr. Alex here, you could go on the internet, go on to ct.hires, and put in your information, what you're looking for there. We have another job fair. We just had one at Rensselaer's Field, which we had over 100 employers and over 1,000 veterans show up for this job fair. So we're having one in Fairfield County in September. More information will be that towards the end of the summer. But under the Department of Labor on the internet, you can find our names. We're in the 5 big cities. And just contact us, and we'll play the matching game. We'll hook up a veteran to meet your needs for your business. Thank you.
Oh, I'm Peter Van Loon, and I appreciated Karen's information about the difference between what the vets are thinking and how it's perceived in the civilian world, and the fact that both need to come together. That's really powerful for my troops when I talk to them, because I've been with them. I've been on the civilian side for 35 years in reserves, and the vets, they need to understand how to move forward, not just wait for somebody to come to them.
And I don't want to lose the other half of the equation, because that seems to be the really paradigm shift there, and it's the mutual adaptation. And that if corporations can incorporate, you heard they're amazing veterans. I think they have all and would all credit the experiences and training that they received that is technology. I mean, the military does teaming. They do communications. They do project planning. They do performance management. That is a technology that is used, that great, and it's been, they're constantly improving. They want standout performance, high performance. They want the best. They have to have the best, or somebody's going to pay dearly. And so it's that mutual equation. It's because right now veterans are being told they need to accommodate the existing civilian structure. Civilians start to look at some of the ways that veterans, that are applicable to your environment, that veterans operate, the training they have, incorporate that, and then the veterans that walk in will not feel so alienated. Right? I'm sorry. You know what? I'm
sorry. No, you kind of stated what I was thinking.
Oh.
That, I'm sorry. I spent 38 years in procurement and supply diversity. And more than half of my career, I was dealing with government. I worked for government prime. So I worked on quite a few platforms for the Air Force and the Navy, and the Marines actually. And back during the 80s, when a lot of the soldiers were transitioning out, they came into those defense contractors, into those industries, and they fit pretty well because they had a structure. We had a structure that we had to follow. Then it was called ASPR, DAR, FAR, but we had something that we had to follow. And plus, we were constantly audited. So when we had the service people come in, we had some generals, we had some admirals that I happened to work for, that, I had to get used to them in my environment. So what my point is that you have to look at from industry to industry when you're putting vets into corporations, because there are some corporations where vets are going to fit in like that round peg in a round hole, and then there's going to be others that you're going to have the square peg in the round hole. So again, it's identifying them. And I think today, more that silo, because I was looking at your statistics, and to me, from the private sector, it's a 10,000-foot, view. And for me, I lived through the 80s and 90s working for defense contractors, and including in the international arena, and I saw from experience what has happened. Somewhere we got lost, and what I'm seeing today, somewhere we got lost with our vets. Because back then it was an easy transition. I know Reagan was putting in a lot of money into the military, so there was jobs galore. They couldn't fill them all. So that's just but you answered my question.
The one thing I wanted to bring up, as far as finding veterans and seeing us and hiring us, I remember when I first came out, I got out in 2010, and I went to unemployment office and I met with the VA rep, and he taught me how to build up an entire resume, build up my sheet and everything. When I was sending my application out to the State Departments, federal, trying to get a state or federal job, apparently our applications are being ran and sought through by a computer. So you guys, or anyone that's hiring veterans, are missing key points. And one of the main things one of the key things I put on my resume was that I was able, as a convoy commander, leading convoys through the desert and combat zones, that I was able to get clearance through the military. I was debriefing lieutenant colonels as a sergeant, and straight out of high school. I no college, no anything, but I was the one writing the briefs, and I was the one holding the intel, communications, leading 100+ truck convoys with 200+ personnel through the desert, through a combat zone. How are you going to see that on a resume if a computer's doing it? Can't hire a veteran that way. Not going to know what I did. Not going to know what I had. Not going to know what he did. If nobody's actually taking a look at it, it's a computer.
Well, we could get into algorithms here. By the way, they're not objective. They're as objective as the person who programmed the algorithm. Anyway, I just want to throw out one concrete example also of what the best of the best is talking about. This is something that has already been integrated into some corporations. It's called the After Action Report. Anybody who was around, remember the quality movement? Remember? I know it's been a long time ago, somehow it didn't stick. The After Action Report was actually in a modified version incorporated into the quality movement. So that's an application from military to private sector. Now, if a veteran comes in and sees that there's something like an After Action Report, they're already feeling more comfortable. And the civilians are already getting maybe enhanced performance. And there is the former head of HR at Covidian, which is now Medtronic. He, in fact, a Marine of 21 years, brought in the After Action Report into Covidian. So, having said that, thank you all. It's after 11. Anybody is welcome to stay and talk to anyone, but I can't thank you enough for coming here. I wish you a wonderful Memorial Day. Thank you all, veterans, for your service, and I just can't say anything more except thank you for coming. It's been great.